When trade between countries and cultures first began, it involved long, hazardous journeys by land. The only goods that could be carried any great distance were those of low weight but high value, such as spices, jewellery, and lightweight cloths such as silk. The most famous example of this being the Silk Road, which brought spices and silk from the Far East across Asia to the Middle East and onto Europe. As ship technology improved, it became possible to bring these high-value items, plus more bulky but still valuable cargoes like coffee, tea and cotton back to Europe. Not just from the Far East, but also from the New World. The Americas were being carved up by European military might and exploited for their natural resources, but sending ships there from Europe on trade expeditions was very expensive and very risky. Not only would ships fall foul of the weather and the sea, but also of pirates and indigenous populations not always pleased to see their wealth plundered. These costs, at first borne by a few very wealthy individuals, some of whom were ruined by failures, had to be spread out. A mercantile system formed where the cost of an expedition would be spread out among many rich people, as would the profits and potential losses. Plans for expeditions were made by groups meeting in coffee houses, the most famous being Lloyd's of London. As the amount of trade grew and ships became larger and expeditions less risky, the coffee shops and brokers grew into banks and insurance companies. When the Industrial Revolution happened, the need for finance became much greater. Capital was needed to build factories, buy raw materials, pay workers, and ship manufactured goods to where they could be sold. There needed to be more and bigger ships to carry the raw materials and manufactured goods, and railways needed to be built to carry those goods within countries. Raising and supplying capital for such investments became an industry in its own right. Large numbers of people now were solely involved in manipulating money, and the amounts involved became so high that the countries themselves became clients of the banks. This is capitalism. The basic underlying principle of the capitalist system is supply and demand. People need things, some to live, others to make those lives easier, and some just because of the thrill of ownership. This creates a demand for those things. Entrepreneurs will set up companies, usually using money lent to them by banks, to supply those goods and fulfill those demands. If too little of a demanded item is made, there is competition among buyers to get the ones available, and prices rise. High prices encourage others to start making those goods, so supply increases and prices drop. If too many of an item is produced, then there is competition among sellers and prices drop further. As prices get lower, companies will cease to make enough profit to justify manufacturing the items, and supply will fall, which will then lead to prices rising again. This cycle applies not only to manufactured goods but also to financial services and labour, which can be considered as a commodity that can be bought and sold. The theory is then that such a system left to itself will end up in an equilibrium where supply and demand are balanced and everyone is happy. This is known as the free market. Many politicians, particularly those on the right wing who follow a libertarian philosophy, believe that governments should do as little as possible in order to let the free market operate. However, capitalism is not as perfect an engine as the theory implies, and in the next video we will be discussing some of its problems.